Greetings, dear listeners, and welcome to a new episode of our Giant Leap podcast, presented by the Space Generation Advisory Council. Our Giant Leap discusses diversity, equity, and inclusion issues within the international space industry. As our journey to unravel the beauty of the space industry continues, we land today in the east of Africa. While Kenya is often celebrated for its captivating wildlife and awe-inspiring natural landscapes, today we venture into a different aspect of Kenya's identity, its role as a pioneer in the African space industry. My name is Amin, and I'll be your host for today's podcast. In this episode, we welcome Joan Chesoni. Among many other things, June is a space lawyer and a gender equality activist. June, it's our pleasure to have you today as our guest.
Thank you, Amin. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, June, just to let our listeners get to know you better, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, hello, dear listeners. My name is Joan Chesoni. I'm a public sector lawyer, a state attorney for the Republic of Kenya, where I have worked for over a decade within the public sector. I'm a specialist in government transactions advisory, particularly public private partnerships, and also advisory on aviation and space law. Currently, I am the representative of the Attorney General on the Kenya Space Agency Board. So I sit in as a director representing the Honorable Attorney General. My role on the board includes advisory on policy and legal matters concerning our space program in Kenya.
Thank you. It's quite impressive, and it's great way to show that space is not just about engineers and scientists, but space is like a whole system that includes everyone and uh, every career path from lawyers to engineers to managers to everyone. So, June, for my next question, it's about the identity of Africa because usually when you think about it, when a lot of people think about it, you don't actually think about space exploration and innovation when it comes to Africa. It's usually the wildlife and wild landscapes and everything. So, can you please shed the light on Kenya's space sector and its ambitions?
Yeah, sure. So I think just right from before we really delve into the Kenyan space sector, maybe it's maybe helpful to give a bit of context in terms of the African space agenda. And just to note that under the Agenda 2063 of the African Union, which is the long term framework for sustainable socioeconomic development and regional integration in Africa, as well as a preservation of our historical and cultural identity as Africa. As part of this program, we actually have an outer space program, and its main components are to obtain maximum benefits from space science technology and its applications, as well as build up capacity um, within Africa for African countries to have robust indigenous space programs. And there is a special focus on Earth observation, meteorology, satellite communications, satellite navigation, and astronomy. So using that as a base point, because the role of the African Space Agency, which is envisioned under the Outer Space Program of Agenda 2063, is that there's a coordinated approach in the utilization of the benefits of the space sector within Africa. Coming down to what the Kenyan program is composed of, um, drawing back on history, Kenya has been active within the space sector from the 1960s. So as you can see, it's over 50 years of activity within the space sector for Kenya. And just giving a bit of a background, how this all started off was in the early 60s. before Kenya obtained her independence, the Italian government had actually identified the Kenyan coast as a potential site where they could have a space center. So, a bit of background: Kenya is an equatorial state with an east-facing sea coast. So, we are bordered to our east by the Indian Ocean, and the country straddles the equator. So, this, of course, makes it a very ideal location to have space activities. So, Italy, having identified the Kenyan coastline, actually, the waters just at that point in time, just outside the territorial waters of Kenya, as a potential site for a launch platform, um, proceeded to set up a launch platform in just outside our territorial waters at that point in time. And this, of course, was in collaboration with NASA at that time. So once Kenya gained independence in 1963, um, we made a decision to adjust our borders accordingly under international law. And the launch facility that the Italians had built, which was an offshore platform, then found itself within the Kenyan territorial waters. And at that point in time, the Italian government then approached the newly independent Kenyan government on a collaboration, and this led to the establishment of a satellite launch and tracking base in an area called Malindi, um, of our, which is at the coastline in Kenya. So the collaboration between Italy and Kenya relating to uh, which was then known as the San Marco space station. So the launch of 20 sounding rockets and nine satellites, and this happened between 1967 to 1989. Presently, Kenya and Italy still continue to collaborate on the ground segment of the station, with the launch platform now having been decommissioned. So there are no launches happening off the platform, but the land segment of the station is currently used for tracking and telemetry and is known as the Luigi Broglio Malindi Space Station. So Kenya also hosted the Longonot Earth Station, which served as a receiving station for satellite communications for the entire East Africa. And then, as a point of interest, also to note that the very first satellite that was launched off of the then San Marco platform was known as Uhuru, which is a Swahili word for freedom, and it was launched in 1970 in a collaboration between the Italian Space Agency and NASA, and it was an X-ray astronomy satellite. So it was able to relay data for 3 years until 1973, when it was decommissioned. Then fast forward, after the launches were no longer happening out of the uh, then San Marcos station. What then? What next? So, as I said, the tracking and telemetry facilities were being carried out from the ground segment. And meanwhile, for Kenya, we had put together a national space secretariat back in 2009. And this space secretariat started the preliminary activities, really towards strengthening what would become the indigenous space program for Kenya. And then in 2017, um, under the auspices of still then the National Space Secretariat, the Kenya participated in the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs program, KiboCube program, which was in collaboration with the Japanese Space Agency, and was selected as a winner. And under this program, Kenyan students from the University of Nairobi were able to build a nano satellite, which was known as one Kenya University Nano Satellite Precursor Flight. So we call it one CANS PF in short. And this was then successfully launched under out of the ISIS uh, through the Kibo module. And this was actually a pivotal turning point for Kenya because once CANS PF was operational for 2 years um, before deorbiting, it was a pivotal point because from this, there was a lot of um, political will, if I can say it that way, for the Kenyan space program. And that is when the Kenyan Space Agency was actually established. So the Kenyan Space Agency is the agency that's charged with promotion, coordination, regulation, and regulation of space-related activities within Kenya, and is formed under an an executive order of the president. So out of the work around the satellite, the winning of the competition under the KiboQ program and the building of the satellite by the Kenyan students, we then had the establishment of the space agency. So our space agency's mandate is tied towards enhancing the utilization of space technology for social economic development within Kenya. And just briefly, I mean, breaking down that into what does that mean for Kenya? So for Kenya, it's about the downstream applications related to agriculture, resource management, disaster management, security and defense, communications, urban planning, and resource management. So that's where we are with the Kenya Space Program in terms of where did we come from, how did we get to have a Kenya Space Agency, and what is our primary focus. And just a little information about the institutional and the legal and regulatory frameworks. Um, so in terms of the institutional framework, between 2017 and now, we have managed to set up the institution. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, we operate under an executive order that was made under the hand of the president. So one of the more critical items we've been focusing on is building a legislative framework that will and regulatory framework that will allow the space economy within Kenya to actually get establish itself and also be self-sustaining. So what do I mean by that? This is the creation of framework where you can have not only public sector but also private sector participating in development and delivery of components within the space economy. We also have the Kenya Space Policy and Strategy, which is currently under review, but also available on the Kenya Space Agency website. And from there, you can get to see more or less the components that I've discussed in terms of what is the mandate of the Kenya Space Agency, what do we focus on, and where are we going. So I mean, that's where we are at the moment, and I hand back to you.
Thank you so much for this interesting journey through the history of the Kenya Space Agency. It was really eye-opening to see the whole picture of how the Kenya Space Agency come to be and where it's going to be, and all of that is really inspiring for all of us who really dream about space and want to be there. And especially, what I really take from your quite interesting presentation is the freedom that satellites give us. Like, one of the satellites is called Freedom, and that's what all the space exploration is about. It's about to give humans the freedom and not to be just located to Earth, but to go outside the Earth and to see what the universe is about. And I find that quite inspiring. Thank you so much. So, moving on to another aspect of Kenya's space industry, Kenya is among many other countries is faring nation. Can you please explain to our listeners what does this term mean and how can we create space sector that is inclusive for emerging countries?
Okay, so I find I usually find this question very interesting because maybe there's no one defined term of what a spacefaring nation can be. I think it really depends on the capability um, of a specific state. If you look at the framework, the international framework that governs the utilization, access, utilization and access to outer space and its resources, you will note that the common underlying theme is that every state should be able to exploit um, space, outer space, and its resources, regardless of its capabilities. So, according to what you can do, if I can break it down to very simple terms, what can you do? What are you able to access? So, what the U.S., for instance, would consider spacefaring, um, to reach, to the level that they are at, and maybe what a country like Kenya would consider may vary. But I think the underlying theme is that each state should be able to access the space economy, should be able to access the benefits of the space industry depending on their capability. So I'd say that for me, the definition of a spacefaring nation is really um, when you as a nation have achieved, independent full operation of the space industry and economy within your own state and are able to participate effectively within your capability in the global space economy. So you're able to actually exploit, um, carry out upstream activities and also benefit the downstream activities from the downstream activities. So just looking at it for me, simply I would just classify it as, do you have the human capacity? Do you have launch capability? Are you able to track and monitor your assets, your space assets after launch? Are your space assets actually functional, operational? Do they relay data? Are you able then to convert that data into a useful format for whatever applications are required? So for me, spacefaring would be all that, and perhaps maybe a little more. But for another state, maybe spacefaring is simply being able to, you know, create a functional space object, build a nano satellite that can actually, after launch, relay data back to you, and is functioning as it should. So for me, that would be my brief, you know, explanation on what a spacefaring nation would be. It really depends on who you are, where you are, and really what your capability is. And at the end of it, how does space benefit you as a country? So, like as I said when we were discussing the history, if you look at, for instance, for Kenya, what are we concerned about? We're concerned about agriculture. We're concerned about resource management. We are concerned about, and something like resource management is really a big deal. And natural resource management. How do we manage our blue economy, for instance? How are we managing our water resources? How are we managing our environmental resources? Looking at things like urban planning. How do we plan our cities better? How do we have smarter cities? So for us, it may not necessarily be, taking a man to the moon, for instance. It's more about like leveraging on our advantages, for instance, our geographical location. It would be a great idea to build a spaceport in Kenya, for instance. So looking at where you can plug in to the space economy as a state then determines what you'd call yourself, how you would define what a spacefaring nation is.
Thank you so much for this amazing explanation, and I find it quite interesting because it really opens the eye on how really being how participating in the space industry can be. Because usually you think about it, you think about going to the moon, going to the International Space Station, having astronauts and everything, and we don't really consider the other aspect of the industry that really could be helpful for planet Earth, as for Kenya, for example, for with agriculture and building smarter cities and everything. So, what I really can get from your response is space is not only about going there to the moon and International Space Station and everything. That's a big part of it, and it's quite funny, it's quite fun, and it's quite amazing to go and explore. But it's also about what space can bring back to Earth and how it can help all humans here. And I found that quite interesting. Thank you so much for your amazing response. And here in our Giant Leap podcast, we don't only tackle space industry, we tackle diversity and gender equality within the space industry, and we really find it quite important because this is how the space industry is going to develop. It cannot develop unless everybody takes a part in this development process and tries to help. So, talking about diversity and gender equality, you you participated as mentor in the Space for Women and a UNISA program. So can you please quickly introduce the program and how it helps foster equality within the space sector?
Yeah, so I think there's the Space for Women mentorship program, and thank you for that question, is one of the things that I'm particularly honored to have participated in. Um, as I said, I'm a public sector lawyer, and many times when we talk about space, we usually are talking about scientists. So we're talking about engineers, mathematicians, you name it. But it's very rare to hear that somebody from the arts portion of things is actually involved in space. And I still do get the question, especially of course in my part of the world, that what do you mean you're a space lawyer? And I have to explain, yes, there's actually this specialization. And guess what? Space is a multidisciplinary um, sector. And so everybody, anybody can find their place within the space sector. So just going back to the UNOSA Space for Women mentorship program, I'm a 2023 mentor, and I have one mentee who I'm very proud to support and help as um, they make their way within a career where they have to deal with policy within the space sector, and they've transitioned from another sector. So it's been quite an exciting experience. And just to briefly explain what the Space for Women mentorship program is, it's a program that was developed under the auspices of the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs, and its aim is to match experienced mentors within the space sector. So, with women, and we do have some men actually in our cohort who are acting as mentors, but the mentees are female, so girls who would like to pursue a career or are pursuing their studies in space, outer space, a discipline related to outer space, and primarily in STEM related subjects. So, I mean, it's very human nature is quite interesting because we learn by, especially our younger ones, learn by observing the older ones. We learn by imitation. We learn by benefiting from the wisdom of those who've gone before us. We learn from standing on the shoulders of giants. So before I got here, I had quite a number of people who supported me. There are several shoulders of giants that I stand on, and some of those still continue to be my mentors. They gave my career very pivotal direction. They supported me when I felt that, okay, maybe I'm not going to go anywhere with a career. I mean, going back to our previous discussion, if you are not aware of the fact that Africa does have a place within the space sector, you would very quickly ask me the question of, okay, so you're going to study this. Where are you going to use it? Are you going to be able to make a career out of this? So it is my mentors who actually encouraged me and continue to encourage me and giving me, fresh new ideas to see how can we have an impact professionally, as professionals within the space sector who may not necessarily have studied STEM subjects, but have a role to play. And I understand very clearly from my mentorship relationships, that my role is actually to support my country in the development of sound policy, legislative, and regulatory frameworks to ensure that we are going to actually have a sustainable space sector that's going to impact this country in a socio-economic manner that is beneficial for the people of Kenya. So without the future, without the human resource, you really can't have any an industry. So having a mentee is my way of giving back and also ensuring that the future is a place where we will actually have women in space. We are just starting up, I mean, to actually identify and acknowledge the importance of having um, women within the space sector. We're starting to understand that the world as it is needs both men and women to build it together. And we have to walk hand in hand. We have to support each other in order to achieve a common goal, which is having a better planet for all of us. And when it comes to space, having a sustainable space industry. And therefore, I believe that, you know, the this mentorship program is a very clear indication that mentees are a critical aspect of the future of the space industry. We need to motivate and support more women to pursue education and careers within the space sector. So, as I said, I'm very honored to have been selected as a mentor in the Space for Women program in this current year in 2023. And I'm hoping really to, you know, assist my mentee refine her professional goals and really achieve a proper footing within the space sector. And, you know, in Africa, we're very big on relationships and we believe in community, we believe in paying it forward, we believe in, holding hands to achieve a common goal. And in Kenya, we have a word, it's harambe. Harambe means pulling together, putting effort together, so that whatever is the outcome is for the benefit not just of me, but of everybody. Because together we can.
Thank you so much for this strong, inspiring words. Indeed, it's only together that we can and none individually. The space industry was built on standing together and this continuous process. Nobody can start alone and finish alone. It's the most important aspect of the human or larger human scale uh, collaboration. And indeed, the mentorship programs are very important for the development of the space industry, and not just the space industry, actually any other industry out there, because it's the it's so important for us, the young professionals or students, to learn from the older generations, so we can go further away, so we can build on their work, and we can and we can explore what they already did to achieve something greater. And that's quite important, I think. And we need to understand this, that the space that right now humanity cannot survive on just men or women, but it's only when we collaborate together, when we take into account all the different identities and all the diversity that exists right now within humanity, that we can actually move forward and create a planet that create a species worthy of the word humanity, species that don't that not a sub part of it just focus on itself and try to benefit itself, but to achieve the greater good for everyone, for everybody out there who is living. This is what we should be working on. We are now starting in this long project to elevate humanity to new levels, and we can only achieve that by such programs, but learning from one another, by creating space that includes all of us, so whatever the outcome, it's beneficial for all of us. And going from there, do you have any tips for to be a great mentor, for all our listeners out there who are interested in participating in such programs?
Ooh, that's a I don't know. Okay, let me see. I think my thing is about mentorship. You need to remember you're there to give. Um, you must reach into yourself and genuinely want the good of your mentee. Like you really want to see them go ahead. And I love what you've said about building on what is already there and going forward. And for me, I think of mentorship like a relay race. And I want to see my mentee, you know, surpass what I have achieved and go forward and really, take it to the next step. And when he or she gets there, then again, it will be their time to pass on the baton. So for me, I think the most important thing is to remember that mentorship is about passing the baton. None of us is here permanently. We're all travelers, and the earth is our spaceship, as we know. So it's about passing on the baton. So equip your mentee to have the best possible future, because every one of us is endowed with different talents, different gifts, and we each have a very unique thing that we can give to this collective consciousness that we call the human race. And when you allow somebody's flame to burn bright and you fan it so that it can burn even brighter, it doesn't diminish you, it doesn't extinguish you, it only helps our collectiveness as human beings to achieve an even greater step. So for me, this is about passing the baton. Do your best and want your best for your mentee. I think that for me is the core of it all. There's so many things I could say about um, how to be a good mentor. But for me, this I think is the most important thing. And I think it's what inspired me, that I want my mentee to surpass what I ever achieved and to really hand the baton and say confidently, this is where I could get. I've given you everything I know for you to have a better future.
Indeed, it's totally about that. It's about, as we discussed earlier, it's about going further and further, and equipping the next generation of mentees with everything that the older generation have learned all their experiences, all their mistakes, all their successes, all their failures, and everything that they've been through. So we have this huge database of experience that we can build on, and we keep improving year by year, generation by generation, until we achieve the highest form of humanity. And it's not only about the space sector, it's about all the different aspects of being a human being. But now we are focusing on this because this is our giant leap. But to our listeners out there, it's a lesson that we can apply in different aspects in our life. As you said, it's helping someone grow does not distinguish you. It's only help you to shine brighter, because this is our role, is to help one another. This generation helps the next, until we all as a humanity achieve what we are meant to achieve, actually. So so with this, we were going to take a short break to the fun fact segment with our friend Laura from the podcast team, who's going to share with us a lesson from history about the Matilda effect.
Have you heard about the Matilda effect? Well, it has nothing to do with the book from Roald Dahl, but was first described by Matilda Joslyn Gage in her essay Woman as Inventor. She was a writer, journalist, and activist for women and Native Americans' rights. The Matilda effect is the denial of the achievements of female scientists in favor of their male colleagues. Victims of this bias against women in science? Cecilia Payne, a scientist who discovered the composition of stars using quantum physics. Until then, scientists couldn't find out what stars were made of. However, one of the most famous astronomers of this period, Henry Norris Russell, told her to remove this idea from her thesis because it was against the common theory then. A few years later, Russell came out to the same conclusions in his work and attributed the merit of this discovery to himself. Other victims? Jocelyn Bell is one. She discovered the first radio pulsar, but whose Nobel Prize was awarded to her supervisor. Henrietta Leavitt is also one for her work on the period luminosity relationship for Cepheid variable stars. Even though the Matilda effect has been first described by Matilda Gage in 1870, the term was introduced by science historian Margaret Rossiter only in 1993. Let's hope things will change and that every person, no matter their gender or origins, will get the credit they deserve for their work.
And we are back. Thank you so much, Laura. That was quite informing. So, to go back to our guest, June, as an accomplished African woman working in the space sector, a dream for a lot of African girls out there, that they only dream about it, and some of them believe that it's not possible for them. What do you have to say to this young generation to help them surpass their fears and go to chase their dreams?
Wow. Okay. First of all, yes, you need to start with a dream. And we have a very famous Kenyan known as Lupita Nyong'o, and she says all dreams are valid. I mean, I've paraphrased that entire statement, but for me, what always rings true is what she says about dreams, that they are valid. And so the very first step is, if you feel drawn to the space sector as a woman, young lady in Africa, I think explore that dream. Don't discount yourself. Many times we actually discount ourselves before we even begin. So for me, the first step is explore further. Look for people who you may not find people within the sector in your own country, but I mean, with the advent of technology, it's pretty easy to reach out. Um, Try and identify who you can speak to. And maybe your country doesn't even have a space program. That should not be a limiting factor. So, one, look at your dream. Two, look at where you want to be in the sector. And if you don't know that at first, it's also okay. If the only thing you know is, I just want to be in the space sector, that's good enough for a start. Three, I'd say start to build your capacity towards being a participant in the space sector. What do I mean by this? I mean, for my story, as I said, it's space lawyers. One, we're not that many within the globe, but even more so from Africa. And I'm really excited and glad to see more and more people exploring, um, taking up courses within the space sector, space policy, space law. Um, we have um, plans around for indigenous programs to start up. So for me, it all started as a child. I had a really wild dream. I wanted to be an astronaut. And, at my time, people are like, who says that? But looking back to it, it's actually the source of that is one of the giant shoulders that I stand on, which is the shoulders of my father. My parent identified that I had a dream. And so what did he do? Um, from when I can remember, I was always reading about everything, but my father made sure that, my selection also included materials that would propel me towards the aviation sector, materials about the space sector. So that's the other thing. You've got to build yourself. Now, for me, I was pretty lucky. Somebody else started to build me. But if you've not done that yet, I have a policy. As long as you're alive, you start now. So it's not too late. Don't limit yourself by saying it's too late. So subsequently, as I grew up, of course, reality checks in and you realize, okay, yeah, I want to be an astronaut, but hey, we don't even have a space program in Africa. So I kind of buried that dream for a while. And now my advice is the opposite to anybody who wants to um, get into the sector. Don't bury your dream. Look for ways to accomplish it. So for me, I was pretty fortunate. I buried it, but it was always there. And when I became a lawyer, um, I practiced, at first, my practice was around intellectual property law. And then I joined government because of that seed, the buried seed. And I joined government actually to practice predominantly in the area of international law, and my focus was very direct. I wanted to participate in aviation, within the aviation sector, because as I said, reality checks in, and you're like, okay, it's a beautiful dream. I'll continue to read about the space sector, but I don't know. I don't think this will happen. And that's why I keep saying don't limit yourself, because I think probably I would have been here earlier had I not kept listening to the voice of, no, this won't work. But it's funny how life works, because if you really want something deep down, somehow everything conspires to drive you to that point. So I started off my practice within the government sectors, um, by learning how to litigate, arbitrate on behalf of the Kenyan government. And then subsequently, I moved on to the division that deals with international law. And because I had spent many years preparing myself for aviation law, the moment I was given an opportunity, it was very, very easy for me to actually move in and explore everything I could about that section.
We want now to talk about a little bit about networking. You are part of the International Space University Board of Trustees and a Carmen Fellow of the 2023. Could you please explain the fellowship program to our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So the Common Fellowship is, if I can put it in my own words, is a leadership forum within the space sector that's composed of leaders who have distinguished themselves and made an outstanding impact within their own respective spheres within the space ecosystem. So All of us are under the age of 45, and it's really a mixed bag in terms of who's who's um, who's part of the fellowship. So we have a total number of 15 fellows who are selected by an independent global selection board to participate in the fellowship. And this is usually a selection that's done yearly, and the period of the fellowship is 1 year. But the way the common program is designed, most of the fellows will stay together, um, possibly for life, because we're entrepreneurs, industry leaders, we're educators, artists, and basically individuals who are building their space ecosystem with an aim of making a positive impact, and with the common theme that I have really, you know, communicated during our discussion today, which is about paying it forward, passing the baton, giving the next generation what it needs, even even as we continue to find ways to optimize what we are working on within our current circumstances in reference to the common fellowship. We have a very interesting setup within the common fellowship where we operate under the Chatham House rules. And so it creates a space a safe space for us to be able to have independent strategic discussions about the future of space, and you know just discuss how we can impact decision making both globally and within our individual spheres. Um, there's a lot of work towards personal engagement, trust building, and collaboration between the fellows. And it's a wonderful network, because if you look into that network and you have an issue, let's say in your country, in your sector, that needs you to solve, or create a solution for, then you will definitely find somebody within your cohort, or previous cohorts, or within the general common community. The bottom line of the common fellowship, the common community, is about space, a sustainable future for the space sector. And I think it's a wonderful platform, bringing um, individuals from across the globe of different disciplines to work together towards this sustainable future for space.
Thank you so much. This was quite enlightening, and we learned a lot from you today about all different aspects in life, about how Kenya made it in the space industry, how is it to feel like to be a space lawyer, and how we should pass knowledge from one generation to another to achieve greater good for everyone, and how important it is for everyone out there, and especially young women, to believe in their dreams and to keep working on them, and also the importance of communities. And with this, we conclude another episode of the Our Giant Leap podcast. But don't you worry, dear listeners, our journey through space shall continue. Until then, please keep shining. The Our Giant Leap podcast is brought to you by the Diversity and Gender Equality Project Group of the Space Generation Advisory Council. You can interact directly with us on the Diversity and Gender Equality Project Group's social media and leave feedback or advice from your side. Also, let us know who would you like us to interview next. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host Amin, signing off.